Okay, so Romans 11, it tells you how more people will be saved. Um, and so this is what Paul says. It's just starting in verse 1. I say then, hath God cast away his people? God forbid. For I also am an Israelite of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. God hath not cast away his people, which he foreknew. Right, so you're thinking about maybe these, all these people that never knew the truth, right? Because, say, the internet, right, it only came around, like, not too long ago, maybe within the past, like, few decades, right? So before then, people didn't have all this knowledge at their fingertips to be able to learn the things now. Now people, they can't really be held to too much ignorance because they can look things up really easily. They have all these different tools. But yes, verse 2. God hath not cast away his people, which he foreknew. Will ye not what the scripture saith of Isaiah or Elijah, how he maketh intercession to God against Israel, saying, Lord, they have killed thy prophets, and digged down thine altars, and I am left alone, and they seek my life. What saith the answer of God unto him? I have reserved to myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to the image of Baal. Even so then, at this present time also, there is a remnant according to the election of grace. Right, grace is conviction to obey. So people today are even elected, right, by God's conviction to sprout up. And if by conviction, then it is no more of works. Otherwise, conviction is no more conviction. But if it be of works, then is no more conviction. And that works, it's the works of the sacrificial law. You learn this in Galatians 3. Otherwise, work is no more work. What then? Israel hath not obtained that which he seeketh for, but the election hath obtained it, and the rest were blinded. Right? All these people were blinded, basically so they could be counted ignorance and stuff. Okay, verse 8. According as it is written, God hath given them a spirit of slumber, eyes that they should not see, and ears that they should not hear, unto this day. And David saith, Let their table be made a snare, and a trap, and a stumbling block, and a recompense unto them. Let their eyes be darkened, that they may not see, and bow down their back always. I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? God forbid, but rather, through their salvation is come unto the Gentiles, for to provoke them to jealousy. Now, if the fall of them be the riches of the world, and the diminishing of them the riches of the Gentiles, how much more their fullness? For I speak to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am the apostle of the Gentiles. Right, so how is Paul an apostle to the Gentiles? Because the house of Israel, they were devoured by the Gentiles. Right, so then they lost their identity, right, the remembrance of them was forgotten, and so their identity became Gentiles instead of the house of Israel, right, the 10 northern tribes. But that's who Paul's looking for, the lost sheep of the house of Israel, who don't know who they are. So I magnify mine office, if by any means I may provoke to emulation them which are my flesh, and might save some of them. For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? For if the first fruit be holy, the lump is also holy, and if the root be holy, so are the branches. And if some of the branches are broken off, right, so ancient Israel, they were broken off, they went into captivity, and that's how they were broken off. They were cut off, divorced. And if some of the branches be broken off, and thou, being a wild olive tree, were grafted in among them, and with them partakest of the root and fatness of the olive tree. Right, the wild olive tree is the people today, right? Christians, whatever, they're the wild olive tree that were allowed to be grafted in. So don't boast, right? Boast not against the branches. But if thou boast, thou bearest not the root, but the root thee. Thou wilt say then, the branches were broken off, that I might be grafted in. Well, because of unbelief, right? Because of disobedience, because that's what they did in 2 Kings 17. They disobeyed. They were broken off, and thou standest by faith. Be not high-minded, but fear. For if God spared not the natural branches, take heed, lest he also spare not thee. Behold, therefore, the goodness and severity of God on them which fell severity, but toward thee goodness, if thou continue in his goodness. So you have to continue in the goodness, right? But anyways, otherwise, thou also shalt be cut off. And they also, if they abide not still in unbelief, shall be grafted in. For God is able to graft them in again. For if thou wert cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, and were grafted in, contrary to nature, into a good olive tree, how much more shall these, which be the natural branches, be grafted in their own olive tree? For I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits. That blindness, right, that we talked about before, that they shouldn't be able to see, that they can't hear. It's what we saw earlier in the chapter. That blindness, in part, is happened to Israel. Right, so they were devoured into the Gentiles, the house of Israel, devoured into the Gentiles, until the fullness of the Gentiles comes in. Right, so now God counts all these guys in ignorance, right? They're blind. So he counts them in blindness and ignorance, so then he can save them. Because if they don't know that they need to do certain things, then they can't be held in ignorance, and God can't save them. Because Satan, right, the accuser, he can only accuse people of what they knew. And so that's why you have mainstream media. They're pushing all these obvious things, right, that are obviously bad. But then people are just okay with listening and watching those things and continuing their sin. But yeah, so that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles become in. So there's a time that there's no more anymore people that are counted ignorance can be just taken like that, right? And so if you look into the prophecy how this happened, you get to 2008. You really have to read Ezekiel 4 and Leviticus 26 to learn that there's this 2,730 years of basically people can be held in ignorance. The house of Israel can be held in ignorance. But then that time came to a close, which you get to 2008. And I'll stop there, but that's really like how all these other people will be saved.